Fans, it's EaglefanKarl. This is going to be my preview and prediction video for Monday night's game against Washington. If you didn't see it, I posted a social commentary video on Washington's football team name that I just posted today as well. I'll go ahead and put a link up there in the corner if you missed that. But from now on, I'm only going to be referring to this team as Washington. So if you hear me this year, I've made a conscious effort this whole season, but now since we're playing them, I think I sort of had to address that. So at any rate, we're going to go ahead and be playing them on Monday night in an important divisional matchup, especially now that the Saints did hold up their end of the bargain. They went ahead and lost to the Cowboys. And frankly, what it was clear to me was sort of a letdown game for the Saints. Not taking any away from the Dallas defense played really well. They played probably almost a perfect game of football from beginning to end on that. But New Orleans, I think, really sort of had a letdown game. You're not going to usually see Drew Brees play like that. And it's clear to me that that just was sort of one of those games. A team wins that many games in a row, they're going to have a letdown at some point. And I think that's just sort of what happened in that game. Of course, all this means just, hey, look at the bright side. It probably means the Cowboys are going to win the division. And the bright side of that is that means that the Cowboys are going to convince themselves that Jason Garrett is a good coach. They win the division. They might even win a game in the playoffs, but they're not going to get even probably to the NFC Championship game. I'd be surprised because that team eventually is going to get exposed. Dak Prescott, I just do not think he is a capable quarterback that's going to be able to win because he just makes too many mistakes. He takes too many sacks. I'm pretty sure the Cowboys lead the league in sacks surrendered this year, and a lot of that I think is on him. I also think, that then also leads to turnovers as well. So at the end of the day, I think that catches up with them, and they're not going to be able to advance very far in the playoffs. But what it does mean is that the Cowboys are going to continue to hold on to hope that they're really close with Jason Garrett and with Dak Prescott, and they're not going to see the need to have to make huge changes. They'll probably even sign Dak Prescott to a big deal, and that's going to, I think, hamstring that organization for years, which is a good thing for us in the long term, that they'll be sort of mired in mediocrity, probably because of some success that maybe they're having this year. That said, the Eagles still have a shot at winning this, and in fact, when it comes right down to it, the Eagles still control their destiny. If the Eagles win out, they win the division. It's that simple. Now, it's not that simple to actually do, but it is that simple in terms of, what the Eagles have left. There's 5 games left. If they win all of them because of who the games are against, we would hold tiebreakers, and we would ultimately win the division with a 10-6 record. Now, the one reason why I thought the Saints game was important for the Cowboys to lose was because then it did give us the benefit of the doubt if we lost to the Rams, which, let's face it, is going to be hard to win that game in LA. But if we beat the Rams, then that would, if we lose to the Rams, if the Cowboys would have lost to the Saints, that would still give us a little bit of a cushion to lose that game and still be able to win the division. So at any rate, we move forward and go into this game knowing that, hey, if we win out, then we win the division, and the only way you're going to do that is winning them week by week. So let's go ahead and take a look at this week's game. Now, before last week's game against the Giants, I talked about how stats are so questionable when it comes to games like this, and specifically division games. But in that point, and also in this point, I think there's some other reasons why stats and team stats are questionable to really do an analysis in a game like this, and that's because most of Washington's offensive stats are based on Alex Smith at quarterback, which isn't the case anymore. And our defensive stats are very skewed because of the injuries that have happened in our secondary. And if you look at where our team rankings were at the bye week versus where they are now after the injuries have really taken effect, now, granted, the New Orleans game was in there that was going to really especially hurt those statistics, but we have really taken some falls in where we stand from a defensive standpoint in our statistics from earlier in the season. So it's already starting to show in some of our defensive statistics, but I think it really is That's what really is scary, is the fact that these numbers are probably actually worse if you look over the last month versus just looking at the whole season. Now, that said, Washington wasn't especially doing that great when it comes to their passing offense, even with Alex Smith. They were ranked 20. They're ranked right now. They're ranked 25th in the league in passing offense. So their offense was not that great. What the offense was really going on was based off their running game and Adrian Peterson, because it's there that they rank 13th in the league. But in overall defense and in scoring, they're 27th. So as a whole, this team, I think, has struggled on the offensive side of the football, and Adrian Peterson has been the one bright spot. The one thing I always thought about Washington as we were going through this season, and they were in first place for most of the first part of the year, the one thing I always thought is this is not sustainable because of the fact they were relying so much on Adrian Peterson, and you just had to know at his age he was going to start to wear down. And I think that's shown in his statistics. If you look at the first half of the season, so basically September and October, he had several good games. He had a couple over 100 yards, several in the 90s. But if you look at this past month, so basically every game since the end of October, he has not gone over 100 yards once. In fact, the most he's ever run for was 68 yards, and that was against Tampa Bay, who has a terrible defense. And it's also compounded on the fact that he's actually nursing an injury. He's been limited in practice this week. I'm guessing he'll probably play. But at the end of the day, you got to think that he is pretty banged up. And I just don't see that he's going to be able to continue to get the job done for that team, which means that it's going to they're going to have to rely some on Colt McCoy, and they just don't have many weapons in their passing game as well. They've got Jordan Reed, they've got Vernon Davis, but those aren't guys that stretch the field. So, when it comes to this team, if there's a team that we match up well against, it's going to be this one, because their wide receivers aren't really that scary. So maybe our secondary can, scheme in a way that will be able to shut them down and maybe still bring up some guys in the box to shut down the running game that they do try and establish. Now, the one interesting numbers that they do have that we can legitimately look at is their defensive numbers. And that's because their defensive numbers, they're giving up quite a bit in passing yards. They're 23rd in passing yards. They're also 28th in the league in third down completion percentage. The interesting thing that when it relates to their defense, though, is their scoring is actually fairly decent in relation to the rest of their defensive statistics. That's because they're 18th in overall defense, but they are 7th in scoring. So they clearly are allowing teams to move the ball, but they are not giving up as many points. And I think that has to do with the fact that their run defense has actually been fairly decent this year. They're 8th in the league in rush defense. And I think that really matters when you get into the red zone, because, the area is a lot more compressed. It's a lot harder to run, a passing game and passing routes. So you need to be able to have a legitimate running game to really be able to throw at teams to keep them honest in the red zone. Otherwise, it's too easy, I think, for teams to stop your passing attack when you've got limited space. It really negates speed and all those types of things. So I think that's one of the reasons why Washington has been so effective against teams. Case in point, against the Buccaneers. They go ahead and give up 500 yards of offense, but only give up 3 points. That's a perfect example of where they're really clamping down in the red zone and shutting teams down, holding them to field goals that Tampa then even misses. Stuff like that, just crazy. It was a crazy game, but that game is really a capsule of sort of what that defense is. They are really good in the red zone at shutting teams down. And then finally, the other thing that really matters in games like this is, once again, I harp on it all the time, especially this year, but also especially in this game, turnovers. Turnover differential is lopsided in their favor in a big way. And that's problematic for the Eagles, who have struggled in that area, both getting and causing turnovers. More than the fact of causing them. The Eagles, except for a couple of games, have been fairly decent at not, having too many turnovers. But, if you're losing a game 1-0 in the turnover battle, you still lost the turnover battle. And that's a lot also on our defense for not causing the turnovers. So I think the turnover differential is something that the Eagles need to make sure that they win. It was something that they finally did win again last week. Once again, it was still only 1-0, but they did win it. The one thing that does sort of, possibly change this equation, though, is Colt McCoy. And that is because I think he is a turnover waiting to happen. Here's a great statistic. He starts games in his NFL career. How many career interceptions does he have? 26. So he is averaging 1 interception per start in this league. Now, he's actually played in more games because as a backup, he comes in when guys get hurt. But still, in terms of games started versus interceptions, he's averaging 1 a game. And we even saw against Dallas last week that he commits 3 interceptions and has a terrible game. And, so if we're able to get some pressure on him, he might force some balls in that really have no business being thrown. And hopefully we can maybe win the turnover battle again for 2 weeks in a row. And hopefully that translates into a win because we've got to do something about getting this turnover number turned around. If we're going to continue to lose the turnover battle, we're going to continue to lose games. And we really need to do what we can to still, force turnovers on defense and not turn the ball over on offense. Washington has sort of hit a wall, though, at this point, and for that reason, I am going to go ahead and pick the Eagles to win this game. My score for the game is going to be Eagles 24, Washington 16. I sort of see this as even being a game that maybe is closer, than maybe 17-16, and we get a late touchdown to sort of make it, give ourselves a little more of a cushion. I think it's going to be close. Hopefully, our offense will be able to do enough against their defense, and our defense is able to take advantage of a backup quarterback. So that's what I think. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Give me your prediction. Obviously, I'll check in after the game. Until then, fly Eagles fly.